Well, hey friends, welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship Podcast. I'm Ty Evans, and for this episode, I got a good friend of mine. He's known me longer than I've known him because I was just a little kid when I met him. So, uh, glad to have my buddy Mclain Mecham on. Mclain is the founder of Bryce Canyon Mule Days. Puts on an awesome event. You guys have heard me talk about that a lot of times on the show. And good mule man, good houndsman, good cowboy, just all around good guy. So McLean, thanks for coming on, bud.
You bet. It's an honor, Ty, to visit with you today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know you're busy. You got a lot going on down there, so appreciate you taking the time out. I know my listeners will enjoy hearing from you. I tell everybody about Mule Days, and they got to get down there, even just to meet you and Mary Lee and Hunter and the whole family. You guys are wonderful. So, um, for my listeners, McLean, maybe you could just take a moment and kind of introduce yourself a little bit more in depth and talk about what you do down there, talk about your family, talk about what's going on with Mule Days and all that kind of stuff.
You bet. My name's Mclain Mecham. Been born and raised right here in a little town below Bryce Canyon called Tropic. Um, I grew up here. We grew up in kind of the farm and trail ride business, hunting. My dad was an outfitter. We, I married my high school sweetheart. We've been married about 35 years. We've got two kids, McCoy and Hunter. Got two grandkids now, Emery and Ty. And that's been a big blessing in our life right there, is these kids and the opportunity, Ty, just to grow up in this little valley. It's we're surrounded by some of the prettiest mountains you've ever been around. Sitting here watching the sun come up on them peaks of Bryce right now. And you sit here in the evening, you get to see this last little light hit that old big mountain to the east of us. Pretty special place, Ty, to be here. And long story short, um, we grew up trail riding. I done that till I was about 21, and my wife, she decided I didn't pay enough money. We had to find another job. So, when you live in an area like ours, it's hard to make a living, doing just one thing. So you end up doing two or three things. So I done a little logging in the summertime. I'd take my hunts in the wintertime. Um, Later, I got on with the trail crew at Bryce Canyon to spend a few years there and then take trail rides in the evening. And so we done that for a lot of years. And then I finally just broke off and just started doing my own rides full time and just hunting, guiding hunters. So, but you wanted to talk a little bit about mule days. Marilee and I took our kids when they were just little. It was probably only 3 and 6 or 7, and we went to Bishop, California, to the Bishop Mule Days. Always wanted to go, and so we went there. I'll tell you how long ago it was. Jake Clark was there. I met Jake Clark for the first time there, and he told me, he says, "You know what? I'm going to start one of these up to our place." So that's probably been, I think he's 28 years now, something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we always had in the back of the mind, you know what? It'd be kind of fun to do something like that here. And it was just a thought for a lot of years. And gosh, here I come home. I don't know, it was 2015 or 16. And my wife said, "Guess what?" I said, "What's that?" She said, "We're going to do Mule Days this summer." I said, "We are." Um, no facility, no nothing. We had a farm. So anyway, the whole idea behind it was trying to bring people to our area. We have businesses here and kind of slow, and so we thought, you know what, maybe the first of May we could get some folks to come here and see our area and show them around. So anyway, she and I went down to the farm and we looked things over, and it looked like a big project. We started cleaning up, started figuring out where we was going to put everything. And gosh, there's a piece of ground right here behind the hill here, just leaving town, come up for sale. And we were fortunate enough with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to be able to purchase this piece of ground. And so as we drove over there and looked it over, I said, this is a little better place to have mule days. And so, we didn't have the equipment. We didn't have anything to try to get this ready. I had an arena, and I'd bought it 5 or 6 years before that, just hadn't got it set up. So I contacted our county and our commissioners, and which are some of the best people around. They've backed us 100%. And so they brought in their guys, their equipment. We started hauling in gravel. A good friend of mine, Clay Shanoth, and the Siret family, which is up at Ruby's Inn, where they've rodeoed up there for years, but they brought in their trucks. And an old rancher from here, he let me get all the red sand I needed to fill in that arena. Bless his heart. The old boy just passed away this year. So anyway, that was the start of getting it there. And that first year, we kind of wanted to kind of do things a little different than everybody else. We wanted to kind of center around the rides, because we got a lot of cool country to ride down here. So, we kind of advertised it that way, and just happened to be I went to Jake Clark's that year, the year before. I met with you, and Sam kind of told you what we were doing, and Sam offered to help. You were tied up. You couldn't get away to come down and do a clinic. So we kind of just done our rides that year. And it was kind of a circus that first year. I was worried no one would show up. We ended up having a pretty good turnout. Next year, I believe we got you there, which brought in a whole new bunch of people. We appreciate you and what you do for our mule days. You're a big part of it. But anyway, things just started to get a little better. My brother Clint, he was battling cancer at the time, and Marilee had a cousin here that they had a little boy, and I think he had a brain cancer. It's DIPG or something like that. Wasn't good. So that second year, we decided to start doing like a fundraiser to try to help some of these people out with cancer. And so that second year, we was able to raise quite a bit of money, and we sent it all to research for this young man that passed away, which I hope it helped quite a bit. But so many good people come to this event and support this fundraiser now, which has turned into a real big deal. The amount of people that we're able to help, and I don't know if it's just our valley or our area, but we have a lot of cancer in our area. And so many people donate tied to this cancer little project we do, and we sure appreciate what they do, because the amount of people that we've helped, or hopefully we're helping, to help them with some of their traveling. They have to travel so far to get anywhere, and so forth. But it's turned into quite a big deal as our Bryce Canyon Cancer Fund, and we appreciate everybody that really has supported us through this.
Yeah, you guys have an awesome event. I mean, everything, with the fundraiser, which you guys do raise a lot of money for that cancer research every year, and that's really fun. My favorite thing, Mclain, is usually somebody donates a gun for the auction, or a couple of guns usually.
Yeah.
And every single year, I think it's just a tradition now. It's just going to have to be, because somebody will buy it, and then they'll say, sell it again. And usually that gun gets sold about 4 or 5 times. And I always feel bad, because I'm like, the last person that finally ends it, like, do you have a little bit of guilt that you didn't sell it again?
Yeah, I'll tell you the first time that they done that, and it was the year my brother passed away. But the Utah Houndsman Association bought this real nice. I think it was a 44 rifle, and they uh, they sold tickets all summer on it. And then they asked if they could come to Mule Days and sell more tickets, and we just auction it off here. Well, he had Rick Erickson build a real nice scabbard for it, but they brought it down, and we always auctioned off the night of the Brandon Hill concert. So anyway, we were there, and the old boy that was president, Dan from Northern Utah, president of the Houndsman Association, he got up there and he drew the name. Just happened to be his granddaughter, and he says, "You know what? This she don't need it. Let's auction it off." And so, like you said, it got auctioned off a couple times, and some real good friends of ours from Montana, Scott and Sandy Slee, he bought it. And so he got up on the stage there, and old Scott's got a big heart. He's a good man, both of them. But my boy and my brother were really close, and Scott had him come up and give him that gun. And so it's a pretty cool deal. Hunter got to take a big old bear with that gun, and so it kind of just sits up on the mantle. But again, people are good. The mule people are unreal. Ty, they're just, this is, I think, going on our 9th year, and every year there's some new people, but a lot of returning people. But I look forward to this time of year, just because of just to be around so many good people. There's no other, it's hard to describe the words, to describe these people, but they're a different breed, and they're
Yeah.
fun to be.
Oh man, you got that right. Mule people are just amazing, this, and but it goes to show. I mean, it goes to give you kind of a pat on the back too, Mclain, you and Mary Lee, the culture that you cultivate down there at Mule Days. You guys are setting the standard for the culture there, and it's definitely one of charity. It's a humbling place. It's a good place, and I think that's really cool. So we love Mule Days. We have a lot of fun down there. The girls love it. They look forward to it every year, and yeah, 9 years. You just said it's the 9th year, man. That's crazy how quick that's kind of flown by.
And it goes in a hurry, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's. I was like, wow, geez, man, it cruises. So, hey, you mentioned your brother a few times, and that Clint was he was somewhat of a mentor to me when I was rodeoing. He was we were at all the rodeos together. I rodeoed with his boys, same age as Hayes. And oh, he was always so good to give tips. Good advice too, like he would never butt in when the time was wrong or anything, but he would always give good advice, and he never talked about himself much, but I've heard from quite a few people he was pretty dang handy back in his day too.
He sure was. He was a cowboy.
Hmm.
He was handy. He could ride anything. Uh, Gosh, a lot better. I always wanted to be able to ride as good as him. I wasn't. I was a little bigger than him, and he was just built just right to ride. But you know, always looked up to Clint. Clint and I were really close. You know, he took me, and I got to do a lot of things that I normally probably wouldn't got to do if it weren't for Clint. But I remember watching him ride. He could ride. Like I said, we run our trail rides out of Ruby's in there for a lot of years growing up, and I think I was about 8 years old when my dad, when we started them rides up there. But this buddy of mine, Will, his uncle had 2 or 3 horses, and they just wanted us to use them. And so anyway, I don't know, I might have been 9 or 10. And these old horses are big old fat horses, hadn't been rode for a couple of years. And well, Will says, you ride old Myrtle, this black one. She's the gentlest. I said, okay. So I threw my saddle on her, and we'd tie all the horses up and saddle them that morning, then string them and take them to the corral where we'd load the people out. So I stepped on that old mare, and I turned her out, and man, she bucked like heck and dusted me pretty good. And I still remember Clint bailing on her, and he let her have it. She but he rode the hair off of her. But Clint he rode saddle broncs, he rode bulls. He was handy, real handy. He could.
Yeah. Yeah, we he lent me a few practice horses for a while. Y'all had, I mean, you've both been in the business of trail rides, and you might remember this little horse, maybe not, but he had this like little halflinger horse, and he's like, it keeps trying to buck off my Wranglers and my dudes, like, take it. And it was actually a good little practice horse. He would just kind of jump and kick across the pen and let you learn some timing. And I just started, I was only 16, 17. So it was perfect for me. But my favorite thing about it is, so you'd ride it down the end of the arena, and it'd get to the fence and it'd finally stop. And so you could just you just swung off it, and then it was broke to lead. I mean, it was gentle. So you just let it back into the chute, and we had this horse and we'd bucked it lots. And there was another kid in the neighborhood that wanted to come give it a try, and wanted to learn. Oh, this is a great horse for you. So we let him get on her, and it went out and it dumped him right away, and he's thinking it's pretty rank, going across the arena, whatever. So I jump off the chute, I go back over there and grab the halfling, and I just lead it back, and I'm petting on it. It liked its ears scratched. I mean, it was so gentle, but it just was a bucking little turd, do you remember? Probably don't. You've seen so many animals, but
I remember the horse. Yeah, it was after I left there, but I remember the horse.
Yeah, it was a good little practice horse, but yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, he told me this will be just right for you. Go learn on this, and it did. It taught me a lot of timing, and it helped me quite a bit. So he was always so willing to help, and he'd been around a lot of these horses so much when I'd go to these high school rodeos, and he'd tell me how it went last weekend, and I was at the point, when you're high school rodeo, you don't pay attention like you should. But Clint paid attention to every horse. And so I would usually go ask Clint about the rein measurement and everything, and ask him about the horse before I asked the stock contractor. I'd go to your brother and say, hey, what do you think of this one? Yeah. And I remember the first rodeo I ever won, it was at Spanish Fork. And there was this horse of Broken Heart Rodeo Company's called Too Big. And big old horse, you had to wrap, if you put a halter on him, he'd flip over backwards. So you had to put the rein around his neck. And I'd only seen him go one time. He looked pretty scary. And anyways, I remember going to Clint and saying, hey, what do you think about Too Big? And he's like, Ty, you're going to have to be a cowboy today. and I was like, yes, sir. I mean, if Clint tells me I got to be a cowboy, this means I better be a cowboy, And so I got myself ready, and that was the first rodeo I ever won. But yeah, I remember that. Hey, you're gonna have to be a cowboy today, Ty.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. He could ride. He had a good style. He Golly got boogered up so much on them bulls that the old arthritis kind of set in and slowed him up quite a bit. But I growing up, we'll switch over just a little bit to mules. I'll tell you a story about him. But we never had a lot of mules. We always had one or two, and they were just good dude mules. But I picked up a little brown mule one day, and this guy coming through had it, and I ended up trading him a horse for it. A little brown mule. Clint lived down here in the middle of town, and so anyway, I was riding down there, and he was watching these boys. His boys were little. He said, "Let me try that mule out." And he kind of lived down there by the town park. He says, "You watch my boys, and I'm gonna go ride her." So he took off. And pretty soon, I seen that mule come running down the street, and I ran out there, and he was laid out in the road by the town park. I don't know what he had. He done spurred her or something, and she went to bucking, and the saddle went over her head.
Oh
And
no.
he might, but it was a pretty good ride there. He did. Oh, when he was in his 35, 36 or somewhat, he's kind of always rode horses, and we hunted on horses. But he ended up having some really nice mules the last several years of his life. But
Yeah. So did you guys growing up, did you guys have mules your whole life, mules and horses your whole childhood? I know your dad is pretty famous as quite the lion hunter, in that area, and well, just hunter all around. But talk about growing up with mules and horses, Mclain.
so, like I said, we always had mainly horses. We kept, my dad always kept one or two mules. He had a really nice big old black gated mule. Then we had just some others. We raised one little mule when I was a kid. Um, Pretty good little hunting mule, but you know, mainly we rode horses starting out. But as a kid, I always had a thing for mules. I wanted a mule bad all the time, and seemed like all the mules I got were the rejects. Um, but growing up, my dad, they hunted horseback. Um, Everything we had, my dad had an old cattle truck. We could haul about 4 head in it. Then he had built-in dog boxes there. You could haul 20 dogs. But growing up right here from a young age, my dad had hounds, and it's just something me and Clint took to. I had another brother, Harvey. He was into it a little bit, but you either like it or you don't. You spend a lot of cold days out riding. But my granddad on my mother's side was a government trapper, and he had hounds. So that's kind of how my dad got into it. And I think my dad's about 17 or 18 when he got his first dogs. And he's 87 now. And he can probably still tell you every dog he ever had. And he can even tell you the lineage, where they come from, so forth. But anyway, growing up, we'd spent a lot of time. That's what I looked forward to the most, was getting out with the dogs in the wintertime and hunting lion. And Clint, he got on to a cougar project, is probably in the early 80s on the Boulder Mountain, where they're doing cougar research. So he's started doing the hounds work there, just catching them, and he'd have the biologists with him, and they'd put radios on them. And so in 87, the year I graduated, I was able to get on that project with him and work that last year. Mainly we were taking collars off of them. And so anyway, that was a lot of good times right there, following the dogs, and just the research part. You learn so much more, when you spend that much time following these animals. But later, I was able to get on with Utah State University, and spent 17 winters up in the Ochre Mountains, up by you,
Yep.
Camp Williams. And I collared lions there for 17 years, and Clint was on the Monroe Mountain doing the same. And I think he may have went 19 years on that project, maybe 20. So we spent a lot of time, collaring lions, and that was a dream. That was where I was, I could go in and lock a gate, and I'd be the only one in there. And so
Yeah.
it was really nice. You didn't have to deal with other people. And
I remembered that. So that's, I remember you and my dad were around each other quite a bit at that time. and
Yep.
and that's when I seen you quite a lot when I was a kid. I grew up in Harriman and Bluffdale and Riverton and all that, and yeah, you were around all the time. It seemed. Um, and I was trying to remember when I was making plans for this episode, Mclain, because you was talking to my dad, and I got this memory when I was a kid. You were talking to my dad, and you were telling him about how these lions uh, would circle those ochres and make big loops. And I can't remember. You was telling him about I think a particular tom, and I'm sure you probably maybe remember, maybe you don't, but those old lions up there, they'd travel quite a bit, wouldn't they?
They do. Them old Toms put on a lot of miles. And we had one old Tom. So we had put the radios on them. With some of the first to start putting the GPS collars on these lions. And so these type of GPS collars we had, you had to take them off to download them to get the information. And so I spent time on the Okers and on the Camp Williams. Well, Camp Williams, it had a pretty good little bunch of lions there too. Quite a lot, a lot of deer winter there. So anyway, this female lion down there, she's probably one of the biggest female lions, and she is the biggest I've ever caught, and we weigh them all the time. And she was a legit 100-pound female. She was a big old female, and she hung right there by Redwood Road. I mean, in fact, she would cross under Redwood Road and go down to the Jordan River and back and forth. But long story short, she had two kittens. And I happened to catch her and treat the kittens, and they were probably about 4 months old, both Tom kittens. And so when we catch the kittens, we just tattoo them, put a tattoo in each ear. So if they showed up somewhere else, we kind of know where they were or who they were. And I said they disappeared, and I happened to be up on the Okers. It was about 2 years later, and I got on this Tom track. I ended up training him, and them Okers it's a lot of oak. There's not a lot of trees down that lower stuff, and I caught him in an oak. I thought, man, that's a big old lion. And so anyway, I tranquilized him and got him out, and I was looking in his ears, and there's a number 25. And I went back to my notes, and I thought, I'll be darned, that's a kitten from down Camp Williams. And he was a dandy. He was a nice Tom. And I think it was about a year later, his brother showed up clean down by Eureka that way and was harvested by a hunter. But anyway, this old 25 lion, he kind of just made his home on the Okers there. And he'd cover that whole mountain. He'd cover from one end to the other. So there'd be a new Tom or something show up there. We'd collar it. Within a few months, it'd be dead. That old big lion, he'd kill him. About every Tom that come in there, he was hard on him. But he ended up being, last time I weighed him, he weighed 200 pounds, which is the biggest lion I've ever weighed. And he looked like one of them old African lions, he's just a big old lion. But he'd had his collars changed so much, he kind of knew the program. So, he'd just sit there and wait for you. There wasn't much chasing going on. But he was a big old lion, and he strictly ate elk. All the kills, with them GPS collars, if you get so many points in one spot, there's probably a kill. So when you go in them kills, I'd say 90% were elk, and probably most of them were bulls. He liked to eat bulls, but and it usually would take him about 15 days to clean an elk up. But he was a big old lion. He disappeared. I don't know. He was probably about 7 years old, and we lost him. Couldn't find him. And I'd put a coyote collar on with these GPS collars, so just in case they went bad, we could find them. Never could find him, and I had the grad student call me one day, and he says, I found him. And so there's a place up there called Hercules. I don't know. It's where they make the rocket fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gotten a covert and was dead in that covert. And so when he downloaded the collar, he could see a few points outside of there. So we went up there. Well, there's a dead elk there. And I'm not so sure that elk might have thumped him in the head or something, but he ended up dying right there. But golly, it's a big old lion. But we collared another female in there on them okers. And I was riding through the flat one day, back to my truck, and I just almost to my truck out in the sagebrush. And I happened to look over, and I thought, dang, there's a lion laying right there. And there's no trees, no nothing around. So I thought I just took them dogs and made a little loop around, come in behind her to get her to go up the canyon. Well, they took her out and treated her right there. I put a collar on her. And she stayed there just about a year. It's just a VHF collar. And they thought, well, she's going to be a resident here, so let's put a GPS on her. So we put a GPS on her. She stayed there about another 2 months, and we lost her. Didn't find her. And I think it was about 7-8 months later. I was on my way home, and the grad student called me. He says, hey, I just found that lion. I said, where is she? He said, she's in Colorado. I said, in Colorado? He said, yeah, she was killed by a hunter over there today. I thought, well, man, that's a little crazy. I thought maybe somebody killed her here and took her over there and tagged her. But anyway, he got the GPS, met the fishing game guys out of Colorado and got the GPS and downloaded it. It was pretty amazing. She left the north end of them Ochre Mountains, and she come all the way almost to Richfield, crossed the interstate, went back up the other side. She went clean up in Wyoming, and she made a loop and ended up in Colorado. It was like 800 and something miles in 3 months, I think, that she traveled. She crossed that Green River 3 times. But
wow,
it was kind of cool to see, how far they're traveling. So,
man, that's amazing. That's wild. So do very many of them travel that much, or is that kind of a rare case?
I think, well, these lions, they're pretty territorial. They have
Right.
their own ways. And so, these upcoming kittens, most of them disperse out. And they may just walk until they find their own home, So a lot of times if you harvest one out of an area, within a year or so, there's going to be another one come in and replace it. And so, but yesterday I had some riders out of Wisconsin call me. He says, did old Scott send you a picture of a lion on his place in Wisconsin? So, they're moving. You're seeing more sightings and stuff back in that country than so they're showing up different places.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, one of my memories of you all the time when I was a kid is you had that old stock rack government truck and have your mules in the back. And let's talk about them mules on these lion hunts. So, like, tell me how these mules handled. Like the first time you come up on a treed lion, what's your process of getting them kind of broke for that? And like, how do you deal with that stuff?
Oh, Ty, every one of them are different. There's some of them don't like the smell of them, and then there was some that care less. And I'll tell you the mules, kind of the mules I like to hunt on are not your dude type mules, because they're not got to go and stuff. But some of these other mules are a little fierier, seem to be better, but they seem to be the better ones around these lines and stuff. I've probably got just a handful you can throw a line over your saddle on. Any of these others even smell one. They're a little wound up. I was on the Okers. I picked up a couple mules from a guy up there. I can't remember who he was years ago. And this little brown mule, he was a good mule, real good hunting mule. But man, dogs were after this lion. They had it jumped, and it was making a loop around, and dogs were coming, and I was riding down this little oak slope, and man, that little mule hit the brakes, and I thought, what's wrong with this thing? And he started snorting, but that lion was laying right there. He was seen me coming and just laid down, but you couldn't get him close to one. He hated the smell of one. But today, even if you're riding along and hunting, and that line happens to cross somewhere, the mules they'll pick up on it. They'll smell it. And bears are worse. Some of these bears. These I've had a few mules you put a bear on, but the smell of a bear really gets them wound up. Wyatt, he drew a bear tag on that Ponsagant. And so anyway, he and I and Clint and Hunter and I think Lee Bybee, there's 4 or 5 of us there. We caught this old bear, nice bear. Wyatt harvested it there, and we skinned it. And Clint had 2 new mules there, and this one was a little white mule, I believe. Not sure where he picked it up. We weren't even close to them mules, and they were snorting and blowing. And anyway, I had a big black mule I was riding, and I got on her, and they handed me the bear up, and I put it on, and Clint went to get on that white mule, and it went to bucking, got away from him. I think when we picked it up, it was about 10 miles away. It was still going, but that smell will stir some of them up, But these mules and riding and this rough country are hard to beat. Happened to be out the other day with Hunter's father-in-law, and he brought a little 4-year-old horse, and he said, "I know you guys ride these mules." After the day was over, when you get in that rough country, they just take it easy. Them horses have a tendency to want to hurry sometimes, especially if you're in a bad place. And it's one thing about a mule. It'll take its time and work through them rocks or deadfall. And they do a good job. And they
Yeah,
jump out these racks a little easier.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
I had
You
a
know
little,
what?
go ahead.
I was gonna say, what you're doing, man. You make good mules, and you know the deal. You've been around my clinics, they're at Mule Days and stuff, and what I do, and I'm, people want to know how to make a good mule. They want to know the tips and all these things, and you got to use them. And like when you're chasing lines, it ain't a trail ride. No, you're going wherever those hounds are taking you. And so like when if you come across a track somewhere, you cut a track and you turn the dogs loose. How long till you typically will have one treed? Like how much riding are you doing until you got one in the tree?
You know what? It varies. Some of these, like where we live versus where I done that cougar project, so different because we don't have the game here like there was up there. So them lines generally didn't go that far. But here a few years ago, I had a client in and we cut a line track just south of home here. And it was in the spring, I think. Um, there was no snow. We put on that line at like 8 in the morning and I caught him right at dark. And it was just 22 miles is what we rode that day. In fact, we had to have him call in, bring the truck around the other way to pick us up. It's just too hard. But, me and Hunter put on one the other morning and 2 hours we had it caught. But it was a night old track. But a lot depends on how old that track is. But there'll be days that could be quick, and there's days, you may not catch up to it. If you got snow, it makes it easier, but you don't get to watch the dogs. Them old dogs get to where they can run them tracks by sight. When you hunt the dirt, it's a lot better because you get to watch the dogs work, and that's probably what I enjoy the most is watching these dogs, sitting on a good mule and watching these dogs. And the other day I trailed one probably about 7 hours, and I thought I was getting close to him and never did. But just to watch them dogs, and they're at it all day long. I mean, just nonstop, just giving it all. But it's what I enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, because like what you do, man, you're around these dogs, you're around these predators, and you make good mules. And I get so many people ask me questions. Well, how do you get your mule good with dogs? And they're worried about their lab that goes on a trail ride with them,
Yeah.
And how many dogs are you taking out typically on a hunt here?
So normally I take about 6. I
Yeah.
usually take about 4 good dogs and a couple of pups. And so when you're going out, especially if you got a client, you don't want to have a bunch of puppies there because you're probably going to have a problem. But these older dogs, they know the program. And if them little ones are doing something they should, them older ones usually tell on them, and them little dogs, them young dogs are wanting to chase everything. And, them old dogs will go check them. And if it's not what it's supposed to be, they come back. Um, and then, getting them around mules, I've only had a handful of mules. It's been really bad with dogs. But, they got these dogs running in and out of them, under them. You got these GPS collars, the big antennas hitting them in the legs, so they get used to a lot. Real quick whether they're going to be dog proof or not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's good stuff. You make good mules. You make good mules for dang sure. Before I interrupted you, you was about to tell a story about a white mule and
oh,
I think probably a
I
stock rack. What was you gonna
talking
say?
about these racks, and I had a little Palomino mule raised, and her mother died like 2 weeks after she was born, so I pretty much just raised her in the house. She was a pet. Anyway, I used her to hunt line on for a lot of years, and I'd come home. I'd usually go up and hunt for a week and come home for a few days, but I'd usually get up about 3 in the morning and head back your way to hunt. And I had that Ford truck with the rack in, and these old mules get to where they open the door and they'll just step on the bumper and down and out. But I pulled up in there to the Okers that morning, and she was backing out. Well, the big Ford's got a little space in between the bumper and the bed. And this little mule, she only wore a little triple lot. She had a little footed cuss. And she backed out and she stuck her foot right between the bumper and the bed and went out backwards. And I thought she's going to break her leg. And being a mule, she just laid there and we worked it out and got it out. Not a scratch on her. But,
Gosh.
a horse would have wound up floundered and probably broke a leg. But since then, I've got this other rack. I've got me a little ramp to get away from them bumpers because it's a little dangerous. But
How do you store that ramp? Is it you like fold it up or like what do you do with it?
it's a half ramp, so it just is. You just fold it up in the back, and so when
Nice.
I back up, it just lays down, so you can they can use it to step on, and then just a half gate up on top, and so it works good.
Yeah, the stock racks are getting to be less and less these days. But like, I've talked to a lot of old guys and back in the day everybody had those. And I'm here in this sheep country, right? There's all these sheep herders around here and these sheep guys and I mean they're going way out in the middle of nowhere, hauling stuff and they all got stock racks and they swear by them and there's a lot of places right here around my house that I'm like, man, if I had a stock rack that'd save me 5 miles of dirt road and I could actually get in somewhere. You can't take a trailer there, but you could get in there with a stock rack, and that's handy.
Yeah, yeah, they are handy. You can get so many more places and quicker than a trailer. And once them animals learn, most of these will stand flat footed and jump in, the rack and back right out of it. But they are handy. Old Clint, he was trapping one year and he had an open rack. So the ones we got now are kind of enclosed. But he had this little stud horse. He I roped on him quite a bit, but he was on his way out to check his traps and going to Slot Canyon there, the dugway we got to climb.
Yep.
So he started up out of there and it was slick and he started sliding backwards, couldn't stop. And he just had that horse in the back and he thought he tried to bank it right there. So he turned his wheels. We went up on the bank of the hill, but it tipped his truck over. But Golly, got out, and that little horse was just out there eating side of the road when he survived it. But pretty lucky.
Yeah, yeah, that can be. I mean, so you're talking about that Dugway going to Willis Creek,
Yeah,
and that can be pretty treacherous if that is slippery, man. That looks
yeah,
rough.
yeah, yeah. You take a ride.
So we talked a bunch about your line hunting, and man, I could just listen to your stories all day about line hunting. I love that stuff, and I need to come down there and ride with you
You need to.
and play around with that. That'd be a good time. Uh, but talk about your business there around Bryce with your trail rides and talk about some of the places you go because you mentioned it earlier, man. You have some of the prettiest country around there. I mean, it's great. So how often you doing trail rides and like when does your season shift to hunting and all that?
Sure. So trail ride season, with Mule Days now, we usually get started right after Mule Days is over. Um, so the rides we do are more private type trips. I don't get a lot of. I kind of got away from the tourist part of it, which is so much enjoyable. You just don't have to worry as much, I should say. But a lot of the people we deal with are riders. They own their own animals. A lot of them bring their own animals out here, and I just guide them. But we got, and you've seen it, some of it really diverse country here. You can ride just a little ways, and you're going to be in completely different country. So like this Willis Creek Slot Canyon's quite a popular one. Um, it's a way cool ride. It's a slot canyon. I'm gonna give you just a little story there that happened to me in that slot canyon several years ago. But I had a couple of folks from where were they? They're from Germany or somewhere. But at any rate, it's about a 3-hour trip down through there. But it was in July, I think, and that's kind of our monsoon season. And this canyon, you kind of always want to watch the weather because you never know what could happen. So anyway, we was going to go that morning. We had a big rainstorm. Number one, I knew we couldn't make it up the Dugway to get to the trailhead. And so I held them off. I said, let's go in the afternoon. So we held off and we headed down the canyon. And when you get in that narrow canyon, you can see above you, but that's it. You can't see ahead of you. And we got in there just a little ways and I heard some thunder. And there's just patchy clouds, that we could see. So I thought we're safe. If it's by Bryce, usually got about an hour and a half before a flood gets there. And so we were almost out. And I come around the turn, I could see about 100 yards up the canyon. I could see ahead of a flood coming. And these people didn't speak English. And so I had them on 2 older mules. I was riding a horse. I just bought him. Pretty Palomino horse. This horse's name was Lucky. But anyway, there was one spot we could climb out. It was steep. So the people couldn't see the flood. I was ahead of them. So I whipped around and I headed up through there and I was waving at them to follow me. And they're just looking at me. And so I jumped off that horse. I ran down there and slapped them mules on the butt. And they headed up through there. I'd say within probably 5-6 minutes, there's about 7 feet of water in that canyon. And their eyes were about that big around. And anyway, so I walked up. I just dropped the reins on that horse. And I got almost to him and he started walking away from me. And there's a big old flat rock in that little drainage. And he tried to walk across that rock and he slipped and he fell. He hit that flood and just shot him out of there. And it's quite, how windy it is. Mm-hmm. I can only see him for just a minute. And then them people's eyes were big. So I got him off them mules and tied them mules up. And I got along the ledges there looking where I could see in the canyon. And I could never find him. I figured he's a goner. And so I went back, got them people. I walked back to the truck, left them at the truck, and it's almost getting dark. I jumped on one of them old mules and headed down the canyon and, Sheep Creek, and then where Willis Creek starts. The flood was going down, but that water waving like that, them animals don't like to walk in it. But anyway, I got him up to, to where the first good slot is, where we always take a picture. I got through it and I got on the other side, and there that horse, he had got on the bank. He had made it. But he was a Palomino horse, but he was caked. You can always tell where it rains by the color of the mud. And he was just caked with that old blue clay. So it hit just right out of the canyon. So that's why it was there so fast. But he lived up to his name that day. Lucky. But
Yeah, you're all lucky or blessed or both because man, that yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand Utah and the slot canyons and how serious that is. I think
oh yeah,
people think it's a little bit of a, oh, that doesn't really happen. Like, hey, you go right down that slot canyon and you look at the flood marks, you can see where that debris has been. And oh yeah, I've seen spots there in Willis Creek like you're talking about that's above my head with
yeah,
debris. You know, you're
yeah,
like you look up like, oh man, that's some it's deep. And it's crazy because it can be a, like you're saying, it can be a blue sky where you're at and
yeah,
you can get that flood. I was in a similar situation in out on the San Rafael. That's where I spend a lot of my time. You know that
yeah,
out on the swell there, and we it was interesting because it was just a little sprinkling of water. Like it wasn't that much. You know, I mean, you don't even get your rain slicker out, right? It just rained a little bit, but that little bit of rain on all that red rock, holy cow! It just started pouring down, and we're up on this slick rock. And you know how that slick rock is. When it gets wet, you're not riding on that. Like you're not going to make it unless you got borium on your shoes. And even then, it's still slick.
yep,
And so we kind of found ourselves a little bit trapped up there. And that rain was just sprinkling, nothing, not a big deal, but it had covered the rocks and the waterfall started. The canyon started filling up. It was it was surreal to see that. And the guy I was with, he was kind of new to that country, it seemed, and he got a little bit bothered by it. Like, hey, we got to get out of here. I'm like, we really can't go anywhere across this rock. You're kind of out. So we did the best we could. We're picking our way, and he just steps off this little like 2 3 foot ledge. Not a big deal, you know. But however he lands and he hits, he tears his groin. And now he can't, I mean, he can't get off. He can't walk. He doesn't want to walk. And well, he was kind of upset with me that day. I'm like, I can't control the rain, bud. And it wasn't
that's right.
even it wasn't even worthy of talking about. It didn't even count as a rainstorm, you know. But it's amazing on that desert and that rock country. There's nowhere for that water to go but just down.
Down.
It's wild.
Yeah, it gets pretty western, and like you said, there's we got so many of them slot canyons around here, and a lot of them, we can't get animals in, but I think it's been a few years ago, but there's a little family got washed away, but it rained like 60 miles away, and that's the thing, they're pretty good about forecasting these floods and to stay out of these slot canyons. But some people have to experience it. You can tell them, but they don't understand how far away that water's coming.
Oh
So,
yeah.
if you're out here, if you see it raining Bryce Canyon, you probably just well stay out because it will flood.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's so much wild country down there by you. I just had Brian Mahoney. You know Brian.
You bet.
He's been to your cell
Yep.
um, on the show, and we were talking about that. And he said, he kind of made a comment. It's like, the good thing about the cell at Mule Days is if you're gonna show up there, you probably want to buy a mule because it's just in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of out there, and so we started talking about kind of that desolation of that country. You get out past Escalante and out on that desert heading toward the Colorado River, and between your place and Lake Powell is a whole lot of nothing but wild country out there.
It is. It is. Yeah. And once again, that's where them old mules really shine.
Yeah.
That's where they excel is in that rough country. And you know more than anybody. You spend a lot of time in that Rafael country and San Rafael country, and you know it's amazing what they can do. And I put them in positions, and they've come out okay, but shouldn't have had them there. But a horse wouldn't have fared as well.
Yeah. I was riding by myself on Friday. I went down to, you know where Gunlock is down there by St. George?
Purdue, yeah,
I was riding out by Gunlock out there, and I was just following this wash down that we've rode down that so many times. I mean, I don't even know how many times, forever, rode down that. But there's a one little slot that you have to go through to finish out this wash. And it's a technical little spot. In fact, I've never ridden that spot. I always have to get off and lead them through because your knees will rub on the walls. Like it's just too narrow.
Right.
I'll have to put my stirrups up over the saddle, tie them up to get down through that anyways. But if I get down to this spot, and it was hard enough getting down into that wash because of last year's floodwaters. It just tore up that place. And like I've never seen. I'm like, man, everything is different here. So I get down that slot, and there's a big old tree blocking that thing. Like probably I don't know, maybe a 14, 16-inch tree.
Uh,
And I had my rope on my saddle, and I got my little Leatherman, my little saw, my Leatherman. I'm like, well, this ain't gonna do me any good here. So I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't know that I can get back up, but I just come down to get to this spot, and this is the route out. Like this is the way out. So I'm thinking, what did I just do? Are you kidding me? Did I just get myself into a spot? And so I'm looking around, and there's some brush. I don't know what the type of brush it's called. It's something that grows down there. It's pretty thick. I'm like, I wonder what's on the other side of that. So I get pushing through this brush, and it's a slick rock face. It's steep. And you know what it's like going up that slick rock.
right.
It's steep, and I mean, I'm like, I I think I think I could do it. I ain't riding it, but I think I could lead them up one at a time. Anyways, but I hiked up there on top of that, looked down past the slot. I'm looking further down the canyon, and I'm just trying to find my way down off this thing. And there is one spot, but it's a 5 foot drop. So this is gonna be a jump. This is gonna be a big jump. And I'm like, well, all right. I mean, I'm stuck. Either I'm like, well, what am I gonna do here? So I get my mule up there, and my good mule, you've seen her. Her name's Hannah. Good little mule, and I get her up there, and she didn't want anything to do with it. She climbed up the slick rock, but coming back off that big jump, she's looking at me like, you idiot. Like, that's taller than me. I ain't jumping that thing. She's just a little 14-hand mule. I had a colt with me, a little 2-year-old. Well, she's almost 3 now, with me. And you know the old saying that ignorance is bliss. Well, it was the case that day for that mule because she'd only been out a couple times. She doesn't know anything about this jump. She's naive and ignorant. And I was like, well, I'll try to lead her off, and she just followed me, just jumped right off. Looked back like, man, we just do that, and then the other mule wanted to follow down too. But I was in a situation there for a moment. I'm thinking, well, I've never got myself in trouble before, but I guess today's the day. But I got out of it.
Uh, yeah, them deals right there. They make you wonder sometimes, but we all have to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of them things. That water can just tear up that desert country like
Oh,
crazy. It can do a lot of damage and change,
yeah,
a place that I've ridden so many times. It was so different just from all that water they got last year tearing
right.
that place up. It was amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever rode that Buckskin Gulch, Ty.
No, I never have. It's on my list. I want to do it.
I hadn't either, but we had planned a trip. Scott and Sandy wanted to go ride the Grand Canyon, but they also wanted to go that. And Dickie Reese and Michelle come out, and a buddy of mine, Tim, come. And we went and rode it. I'd never been there, but talk about an amazing canyon. I believe it's the longest slot canyon in the world, but golly, we're talking about debris and stuff. I know we rode down there. I'll bet you it was probably about 35 feet up, was just wedged trees and junk. But it's amazing, the amount of water goes through that. But you want to talk about some narrow, there's a place down there that, you got to squeeze to get through it. And it's almost a little claustrophobic, but talk about a pretty canyon. Holy cow. But it's pretty amazing.
So is Buckskin Gulch the one that goes down to the Paria?
Yeah.
And then
It,
you can so could you from your place there in Tropic, like could you ride all the way down the whole Paria, all the way to like
No,
89?
once you cross, well, you can get to 89,
Right.
you know, from here. But from there on, I think it gets ugly, on the other side, south of 89. But you can access that. But there's a cave off in there so far. So if you go the lower end up through Buckskin, you only get so far. But we went from the Kanab side in, and oh, it's amazing canyon, but pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll have to do that one of these days. That'd be cool. I'd love to see that.
You need to see it.
I
But
uh I was talking to a gal the other day. She was on the show. She's one of these long riders, Mclain, that so she's ridden from Mexico to Canada
no kidding.
4 different times. And then she did the length of Utah last year. And I was picking her brain how she, and she ended up riding a lot of dirt roads just because of what we're talking about. Like because I would love to ride backcountry. I would love to ride Utah through the backcountry, not get on a road necessarily,
Right.
be able to ride trails, but it's just kind of like that what you're talking about. You get ledged up or slot canyoned out, and
Yeah,
this country's hard on you.
it is.
But it
It is.
makes good mules, that's for dang sure.
Lots of wet saddle pads. That'll make a
That's
good one. That's for
that's
sure.
right.
Yeah, putting them in all different types of situations, and it's just use. You
Oh
got to be.
yeah. So you do something I think is pretty neat. You like to rope on them mules. You like to team rope and goof around and stuff like that. I haven't done much team roping with mine. Very little, very little. In fact, I've actually only officially team roped like one time. That's it. But done lots of ranch roping and stuff.
Yeah.
That's just because I'm really slow, McLean. I'm really slow. And ranch roping you can go slow and it's good, but team roping you better hurry up. But that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Uh, Talk about getting your mules broke to rope off of. Like, what do you like to do? What's your process of getting them good at that kind of stuff?
A lot of these meals that we've started, is we just started, moving cattle on them, and you can tell the ones that are going to be all right. But there's some cowy ones. But I've just started out, just following the cows when we were, moving them from the home to the summer range, and just roping them calves as you're or cows as you're riding along. And but I picked up a little black mule out to Tennessee, and he's actually a gated mule, and he's really not that good a mule, other than he likes cows. Uh, Golly's kind of ear shy. He's hard to shoe. He kind of watches you when you're around him, but man, he loves cows. And so we got that arena going and started roping again, and I didn't have a horse. I don't own a horse, and I thought, well, I'm just have to rope on this mule. So I just started taking him over with him and roping some of them slower steers and stuff. And he'll back right in that box. He'll watch them cows, and he's done real well. Hunter's been working a buckskin mule. She's come along pretty good too. But this year we've had a lot of interest in the team roping, and so Thursday we're going to do a little jackpot roping.
Nice.
We've got buckles, so we're going after dinner we're going to have a good time.
That's gonna be fun. I might have to enter up this year and goof around there a little bit. I just like I said, I get to do a lot of ranch roping around here, relatively speaking, but the team roping not so much.
Yeah.
I want to put a rope and shoot in at my place and get a couple of slow steers and play
Yep.
around with it because a lot of the guys around here that do team rope, they're not super you know, inclined to let a guy with a mule come over and goof around. They kind of like, what are you doing? But yeah, that's pretty fun. I think that'd be a good event to do at Mule Days. And you did it last year, just playing around. But
Just
I think it's fun. You
found
got
out they called. Colby called me the other day and he said, "I'm getting a lot of interest. These guys come and want to rope." I said, "Well, let's rope."
yeah,
We done the ranch sorting last year on the mules, and that turned out real well.
oh yeah,
That was fun. It was a good time. So, but yeah, I think we've got a lot more, I, quite a few more new consigners coming this year.
Good.
A lot of them are ropers, and I'll tell you another thing is old Derek Begay kind of blew up the rodeo world this year, taking his mule down to the finals.
Oh yeah, wasn't that cool seeing Zeke go
Third,
do the yeah, that's a good time. That was pretty cool. I had so many people messaging me and sending me pictures and saying, "Hey, did you see the mule in the grand entry? Did you see the mule?" And yeah,
oh,
then old Zeke thought it was good luck to have that mule because he did so good the first few rounds there.
exactly. Right. Yeah, old Molly Twitchell's texted me. She says, "Hey, you better watch the grand entry. There's going to be a mule in it." But I was watching RFD and they'd hit a commercial when they had the grand entry, so I never got to see it. But long story short, I've got a good friend that she's from New Zealand that comes and rides with us, and she's good friends with Amy Wilson, and she said you ought to invite him out to Mule Days. I said we'd love to have him. I visited with him the other day, so it's on his mind. It'd be kind of
Nice.
he could show up.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be really good. That'd be fun.
I thought
Yeah.
maybe back that old mule in that last night at the finals and rope on him.
Yeah, that would have been something pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah.
See that at the finals. Maybe one of these days we'll get something fast enough. I haven't seen a mule fast enough to compete with them boys down there.
No.
And
No.
it'd be pretty cool if it ever happened, but
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna hold my breath waiting for that one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
They got their place, They got their
They
place for
do.
sure.
Yep. They do.
So, McLean, how many I was just thinking about all your hunting you do and all your ranching you do and all the riding you do. How many miles you reckon you put on in a year on a mule?
Oh, I've had people ask me that, but I never, until we got phones that told you how far you went, but there's a lot of days, especially in the wintertime, I put 20 miles a day on, 25 plus,
Yeah. And
and I ride at least 6 days a week, take Sunday off, but we put a lot of miles on.
no
Uh,
shoot, if I mean that'd be in 120 miles a week. That you'd pile them on, man.
yeah, you put them on. Some of these hunters I know after 1 or 2 days of riding all day, they about had all the fun they can handle. They want to go for a ride in the truck, but we put a lot of miles on.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty fun. You guys have a lot of good times down there and do some good things and yeah, you live a cool life. So
Been blessed, that's for sure. Been blessed to be able to do what I love, and not everybody gets to do that. My wife has
uh,
to remind me every day that you're doing what you love, and I know that, you know,
yeah.
I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, it is a blessed life you live down there. But you work hard for it too. I don't know anybody that works as hard as you, McLean. You just are getting after it all the time. And I don't know when you sleep. Maybe you don't, but you're a great example to me and to everybody. Your work ethic and your your faith and your mulemanship and your stockmanship. I mean, just all the things. You're a great man.
Well, thanks, Ty. I've had a lot of good examples in my life, and I appreciate that. But you what I do wouldn't be possible without people like you and everybody else that come here and supports what we do,
Yeah,
and
pretty
we
cool.
truly appreciate it.
So, McLean, at the end of my episodes with my guests, I always ask about a piece of advice for you to give to some. You know how people ask, well, what's the one thing? And I know there's not the one thing, but if you could tell somebody something that's going through this life, it can be mule advice, it can be life advice, it can be anything. What would you like to tell somebody if you had that chance?
Well, Ty, the times we're in right now, and there's a scripture that is out there that talks about charity and service. Ty, I think we're in a time where we need to serve everybody and give where we can, because in the long run, that's really what's going to matter the most.
That's awesome. You know that charity never faileth.
Yeah,
And Man, that's so good. Well, you do a good job of that. You guys are so giving down there at Mule Days, but even just besides Mule Days, you're awesome. I give your number out to probably more people than you want me to, but people asking, hey, where should I go ride? Where should I go do this? And I give your number and you always answer, and you're always so good. They'll call me back and be like, hey, that's the nicest guy. That's the nicest guy ever, and then they'll come ride with you, either you or Andy. Good old Andy. He's a good
Can't,
man.
can't you know what? Andy's another blessing on my end that he's a good man. He's good with people. Uh, God, he's always right there to help when you need him. And like I said, there's so many
Yeah.
good people, and doing what we do, I've been blessed. The people that you've sent me and everybody else. You just they come to ride, but they leave. Most of them leave with good friends. And God, you just can't beat it.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well, yeah, you and Andy and Mary Lee Hunter, all you guys are great examples of that advice of serving others and being charitable, and that's awesome. So, um, we there's probably a million things we didn't get a hit on, but that's all right. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss before we sign off here, Mclain?
I'm like I told you, I'm not much of a talker, but uh, I appreciate the opportunity, Ty, to visit with you today and talk to you, and really appreciate what you've done for the mule world. God, you travel all over the country and put a lot of time out. You got a super good family, we love your family, especially them two little girls.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, sure appreciate you and what you've done for the.
heck yeah. Well, I appreciate it. That's great. We enjoy it. Try to give back just like you're talking about, best we can. So,
Yep.
well, I appreciate you coming on, McLean. Appreciate everything you do. Before we sign off, I got to thank all of our sponsors here real quick that make this episode free for everybody. We got Roman Home Tents. Good old Ben Lewis. He comes to Mule Days.
There, you bet.
Good
Good
man. So
thought.
he's a sponsor of the show.
Yep.
And we got Colt Saddlery. He's building good custom saddles. He does a good job for us. We appreciate his support. Diamond W Enterprises. If you guys are looking for a good jack, breed your mares too this spring. Look up Diamond W. Kevin right there in Fountain Green, Utah. Also, our favorite mule magazines. We've got Mules and More magazine that supports this show, as well as Western Mule magazine. So big thanks to all those guys. If you guys ever run across those people, tell them thanks for supporting the podcast, making this free for all of you. So, with that, you guys, God bless you. Don't forget to come to Bryce Canyon Mule Days. Don't forget to come to Bryce Canyon Mule Days, you guys. But God
Okay. Good.
bless you, and we'll see you down the road.